Hi, this is the 6th video in the How to Use Famitracker series. In this video, we're going to focus on a concept that's a bit more abstract called instrument juggling. Since the number of available channels in Famitracker is so limited, available space should be used as completely as possible. Now, this isn't to say that you have to use the space here, but being aware of the best practices for juggling can actually be extremely important for when the time comes. In the example that I have displayed here, notice how the pulse 1 channel is bouncing between two different instruments. The 0-0 channel here is playing kind of a long note, and then the 0-6 channel is playing like a bass note. So I'll just play this, the whole loop. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to solo this pulse channel, and notice how the notes both kind of overlap each other, but they also stay on one channel, so it tricks the ear into thinking that two things are playing at once. So in this next example, notice how the triangle channel bounces between playing a bass line and the triangle kicks we talked in an earlier lesson. And if my computer would stop glitching out, I'll solo it and Also, if you're interested, the process of making this track can be found later in this video series. Instrument juggling is a difficult skill to master, and it requires a kind of situational awareness for which elements of a song are the most important at any given moment. While other lessons in this series talk about more concrete knowledge, I'm going to offer a few tips to keep in mind while juggling instruments. Probably the most important thing you can do to juggle instruments is pay attention to when notes start. To the listener, most of the time the start of the note is the primary driver for both the rhythm and the melody. So in this example, you have a bass line underneath a simple lead on top. Notice that even though the lead gets cut off quickly, it still sticks around to the ear. So I'll play that one more time. So you still hear that kind of both are playing at the same time, even though they're not. When it comes to overlapping melodies, work on picking the dominant one. Often this is the one with more energy, and it generally stands out more. This comes into play a lot with the noise channel, actually. You might have a long cymbal crash, but you want to play your kicks and snares as well. You can still play the crash, and then the kick, resuming the crash at a lower volume to the next row. So essentially you're ducking the crash out and then bringing it back up. So this kind of what it sounds like. It's a very basic example, but you can kind of see where I'm going with this. And you can do the same effect with melodic instruments as well, having a long, low drone going underneath the melody whenever the melody itself isn't playing. Finally, and I think almost most importantly, it's important to know which notes you should prioritize in a chord. Since Famitracker is so limited in instrument channels, playing full chords without arpeggiation is often a luxury you really can't afford. So this tip is a little up for debate depending on who you ask, but this has worked well for me so far. Also, keep in mind that I'm talking about basic chords right now, like major and minor triads with 7th chords, just major and minor chords. This doesn't really delve too deep into music theory. So the most important note in a chord is the root, which basically defines the chord's place in the overall chord progression. So a C major chord, C, E, G, the root would be C. Now keep in mind that the root might not be the lowest note in the chord, but it is the most important one to prioritize. So you can still have a C major chord by having C on top, or C in the middle. But it's important to know which note is the root of that chord. So the second most important note is the third. So again, a C major chord, C, E, G, C, E, G. A third would be the E, or the middle note. And the third is important because it defines the tone and feeling of the chord, either major or minor. So if you have a major chord, C, E, G, or a minor chord, C, E flat, G, so it changes the entire feeling of the chord. Finally, the seventh is the third most important note of the chord. So a C major chord, C, E, G, the seventh would be above the G at the B. So, and these chord extensions are very important to both create interesting color in your chords and to generate tension to help move the song forward. So right now we're prioritizing the first, which is C, the third, which is E, and the seventh, which is B. Whoops. And if you don't plan on using the seventh, then the fifth can be used, which would be the G and C, E, G. And the fifth really isn't often very necessary. In many cases, the fifth's job is to reinforce the root note and to smooth out any dissonance that might arise from using like the seventh or the ninth or other chord extensions. It basically acts as extra structure and like scaffolding to the chord, but it doesn't provide any extra flavor or color, which is why power chords are just the fifth, C and G, why they sound so solid and huge, because they're taking up, it's basically just one note with reinforcement behind it. Really, a more elaborate explanation can be found in a wonderful presentation given on the elements of chip music, which can be found at either a link above or I'll definitely include it in the description below. If you have the time, I really recommend watching the entire video, but I've time-stamped the important part. So yeah, instrument juggling is one of the more difficult things to master when it comes to using Famitracker, but also one of the most rewarding because it can create really rich and complicated sounding music while still using the same 4 channels that we've been talking about this whole time. It's definitely worth taking the time to look at your projects and ask yourself if adding another layer of sound inside one of your channels is possible. And if it is, then you should really look into doing it because it adds a whole layer of depth to your project. So if you have any questions, get in touch with me through the comments below or my Twitter handle above. If you found this video interesting, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel because I plan on making a lot more content like this in the future. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one.